From Toronto, PHANTA Media presents the Not So Corporate Podcast.
Hello. My name is Mark Drager, and I'm the host of the Not So Corporate Podcast. Welcome to the beginning of 2016. I'm sure everybody is welcoming you, but I'd like to be the first to welcome you.
I don't think you're going to be the first. It's like the 7th.
I would like to be the first podcaster to welcome you to 2016. I'm joined in the studio here with Leah Earl.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. How you doing?
I'm pretty good, you know.
And on this episode, we have a very special episode. We're doing something a little different. I feel like we say that every week, but
no, but we are.
But by next week, we'll be back into our normally scheduled programming. But this week, we're doing something a little different because we're going to be talking about the two TED Talks that really struck me. I was lucky enough to be able to go to the TEDx conference in Toronto, and so for most people, I think know what TED is. TED is a conference that started in California, about 15 years ago, maybe, and it was about all spreading ideas worth spreading, or whatever their tagline is. But basically, it started in California, and then it was so successful when it started being video based, and in 2007, 2008, 2009, when video was able to be released through the web, it really kind of took off. And then they started these TEDx conferences, which are independently run conferences under the TED brand in different cities. I was lucky enough to be able to join the Toronto conference. And you know what? There were two out of the day. I mean, it blew me away, and we can talk a little bit about that later if you want. But I went in with pretty low expectations. I thought that it was going to be a lot of people patting themselves on the back and like, look at how smart we are. We're all here at TED. Isn't it great? And I was really impressed, actually. It was a great conference. It really had a lot of different speakers saying a lot of different things. But there were two specifically where I was like, oh, man, this is like, they really struck me as something interesting, something remarkable, something worth speaking about. And I know that some people are into the talks, other people are not into the talks or the people, particularly you, Leah. But I wanted to share them, and so we reached out to TEDxToronto and we said, hey, we have this podcast. We would love to be able to share some of the audio clips from the talks on it. And they said, yeah, that's a great idea. Just go ahead and just reach out to TED Corporate and find out if we could license it. And as it turns out, we can't license.
They said no.
They said no because only because this is an audio only medium, and they only release content in video. And so it wasn't that they didn't dig what we were doing or anything. It's just we didn't fall within the parameters of their licensing agreement. So if you haven't had a chance to check out the TED Talks, why would you have, right? I mean, it's like TEDxToronto. These are great talks, but I'm not going to assume that you can keep on top of every single TED Talk that comes out of every single TEDx.
So many.
There really is so many, and there's some really great ones actually that have shaped our business in the past. But the two we want to talk about today are really Andrew Peek's talk and Jordan Axani's from the 2015 TEDxToronto talk. They're on our episode page on our blog. You can check them out, and we're going to proceed assuming that you've watched them, assuming that you were blown away by them like I was, or you really
or
didn't.
You're angry and didn't like them like other people.
Like Leah. But we're going to assume that, and we're going to proceed from there. So before we jump into them, though, Leah, you had some thoughts on the talks that I shared with you?
Yeah, so I've only ever watched TED Talks that would be like a little more famous, so ones a lot of people have seen.
But, like, mostly you mean from like the TED conference, TED conference in California.
Yeah,
I think it's a 3-day conference.
Yeah.
It's invite only. It's very kind of prestigious.
Yeah, and the ones that get around, right? So everyone says, did you see
that get around?
Yeah, did you see this TED Talk? Like the really slutty TED Talks that everyone has seen many times over and over. They quote them, etc. So I was not prepared for how informal these guys were and how approachable their personalities were. They aren't like big. I guess they're both entrepreneurs that are fairly successful at this point, but they're Toronto guys and they are young, and so I definitely thought that was cool. And when I looked through your book that you had, a lot of the speakers looked interesting to me because they weren't like old white dudes that run software companies. No, I was like, oh, I'm interested. What are you about, right?
Yeah.
There was a couple women in there I thought looked interesting, and so.
Well, and so because It's interesting, though, how much for myself TED Talks have shaped the decisions I made in the business. I remember when I brought Daniel on early on, he was compensated on a commission model as a salesperson, and then like 6 months into working with him, I saw a TED Talk that talked about the fact that in our new economy, how tying compensation to problem solving or coming up with problems doesn't motivate smarter, better decisions. So if you're doing a widget, if you're in a factory and you're doing a widget and we say we'll pay you twice as much to work twice as fast, you can make more widgets. But if you have a complex problem or a complex job or a really thinking-based job or strategy-based job, saying I will pay you twice as much to come up with twice as much strategy, actually it creates an opposite effect. Compensation tied to something like that actually reduces the amount of creative thinking. It actually simplifies things. It actually returns worse results. So I saw this TED Talk and I was like, wow, and I went into it and we sat down and we really shaped the compensation on our company around the idea of let's not just tie things to performance, but let's just pay people as to the best of our ability and make sure everyone's comfortable to be big thinkers. That was a TED Talk that I was like, oh, that's so amazing. Or Simon Sinek with Start With Why, which has really shaped our business and how we think about things. And his TED Talk was great. I would say that these two, that Andrew's and Jordan's, I was equally impressed with and blown away by. But I was there the day of, and I mean, I've rewatched them, but I was there the day of, and I had low expectations. And so maybe you coming at this a little bit from a different perspective.
They're both cool, and they're both like philosophy sort of based things, and like they're like creative ideas that you can take to anyone's life, anyone's business. They're not very specific. I thought they were both interesting. I just didn't. The second Jordan, I just didn't really enjoy him.
Let's get into it. So
him.
the first talk that
Okay.
I would love if everyone just took a look at was Andrew Peek's, and his talk is on why our stories are going to kill us. They're going to be the death of us. And so Andrew was someone, just to share his background, he was someone in high school who got into a bit of trouble. He found himself, I think he was a drug dealer. He found himself in court, and a judge kind of gave him a second chance to kind of clean up his life. It was very touching because the judge was actually there watching him speak, these 12, 14 years later. But he went on to start a web-based agency that was purchased by Shopify in Toronto, and then into his career, he was a year and a half into his new role at this new company that was purchased. He was living kind of the entrepreneur's dream, right? You're building a company, you're selling the company, you're the hot shot, you're in your early 30s, and then he's fired and he's let go. And so what I really took away from his talk, which I found most interesting, is and these two talks I found interesting is because we spend so much time, I think, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as people trying to make it in our generation, in our economy, trying to live that big purpose, trying to identify who am I. I heard something. I think it was on Modern Family, which my wife and I are...
surprising. Were you watching Modern Family?
My wife and I are watching Modern Family right now. No.
Funny.
But someone said something in it, and I don't know which character it was and who they were talking to. I don't even remember anything about it because we're watching them so quick. But they said something like, you spend all of your childhood and all your teenage years trying to fit in, and then you spend your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s trying to be different. And, I find that really interesting because you do spend so much time early on just trying to be like everyone else, but then you hit this point in your life where you're like, the last thing you want to be is like everyone else. You just want to be different. You want to have your purpose. You want to have your path. You want to have your identity. You want to be known for doing something big, something great, something better than everyone else. And so if you have that drive and that desire, I find it can be crushing after a time, because if you're in your second year or fifth year or 10th year or 20th year and you don't feel like you're progressing as fast as you should be, that can be, for me, I feel like that can be crushing, because it feels like you're just not getting where you want to be. But what I really appreciate about Andrew's story, about Andrew's talk, is maybe we're holding on too much to that identity that is pigeonholing us into something, rather than allowing us to shift and pivot and have a more linear story, rather than grasping onto something that you think you should be, when in fact you are who you are, right? You don't have to spend so much time working so hard trying to be who you think you should be. that was kind of my takeaway from it. Maybe that's not what he was saying. That's what I walked away with, though, from his talk.
I found it interesting that he told a number of stories and then said he didn't want to be a story. He wanted to be an idea. Mm-hmm. And so, but the stories he told were, I guess, really dynamic. And so he told a story. I watched a trailer for this TED Talk as well, which I think we should also put the links up. It's sort of like a little, maybe they showed them at TED, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
like a little, I thought it was really cool.
Funny enough, those little trailers were actually produced by a company, a Toronto video company called the Immediate Group, and Ryan Bergman is the creative director there. And like 2 years ago or 3 years ago when they were starting the firm, we got together for a cup of coffee and we were talking a bit about, we were going through stuff like we talk through on the podcast, like the issues that people face. And he was one of the people who really stuck out at me because I was like, this guy, he's got a great eye, he wants to do big things, and he was struggling with some of the same topics that we've covered in this podcast. He's one of those people who I spoke with who later a few years later, I was like, if I had a podcast to be able to hand him, then we'd be able to help him out greater. And I was so impressed because when I got to TED, his logo was everywhere. They were playing all of his video content. He produced all of the content for the event. And I was so impressed. I connected with him on LinkedIn and I IM'd him and I was like, are you here? Like, this is amazing what you're doing. I was so impressed and slightly jealous, I'll say, to be able to say, like, how is it that this guy, like it's amazing. I stuffed down my jealousy of like, oh man, he got this contract. We should have had this contract. But I was just so impressed what he's done in kind of 2 years, I think, or 2.5 or maybe 3 years, or maybe even less. But to produce the content that he was producing for the thing. So like little side note there, shout out to Ryan and everything that he's doing because I was just blown away by those videos that they produced.
They're really cool. They're really cool.
Really, really great.
Specifically the one for Andrew is really interesting because it shows a number of stories that end in failure. So he got into trouble and got arrested, right? And he ended up in front of a judge. And they're in the trailer, it's more like honed into like failure, and like getting fired. And so I thought it was really interesting that he was basically saying that not to let those things define you, and that when you're sharing those sort of stories with people, you're drawing a conclusion. Like, this is who I am. I'm the person who dealt drugs in high school and had to appear before a judge and was given a second chance, as opposed to him saying that he wants to be something a little more dynamic, which is what he calls an idea, so that he can keep on changing his story and changing his identity, I guess, changing who he is and not be defined by these sort of failures, which is something that as an entrepreneur that everyone's going to have to face, right? And that everyone's going to go through and have to get over, and not let that define your business. I think
the idea is not to get pigeonholed, not to allow yourself to get pigeonholed, but also not to tell yourself the negative self-talk or the, like the idea of a stay-at-home mother who's been working for 20 years to say, I'm just a mother. Right? I mean, that's you defining yourself. Or if someone is in their 40s or 50s in a corporate career, but they've always had a dream of being an entrepreneur, and they're like, well, I'm just a middle manager. Oh, I'm just a corporate guy. I'm just that's the story that you have defined your life at, rather than the idea of you. The idea, and this is what I took away from this is well, like, what's the story that I tell myself? Am I an entrepreneur? And I always face this. It's such a silly thing, but I face this when I have to fill out a form, and they say, "What is your profession?" Or when I'm traveling on a card, on a Visa card, on an entrance card, and I have to say what my profession is. Do I write entrepreneur? Do I write video producer? When I used to spend more time doing that. Do I write creative director? Do I say I'm a marketing executive? Do I say I'm like what am I? And so I always have to try and figure out. I've never identified myself as an entrepreneur. Because when I started, I never felt like an entrepreneur. I felt like a video person who wanted to build a business, and then I felt like a business person. And you tell yourself that story, like Leah, what is your story? You're someone who you went to school and you took journalism, and so there's that version of you, and then there's the person who's worked in bars and restaurants and stuff, and there's the person you traveled to Scotland, and and you're a mother and you work here.
You know a lot about me.
I feel like we've worked together a few
Yeah,
years.
it's true.
But so you've done all of those things, but what is your story? And so I think your story can be very helpful if you feel like you're wandering. Help bring some definition around you. I think that what I took away from Andrew's thing, though, is sometimes your story holds you back, right? You define yourself as a linear story, as a hero, or as a victim who's going along this path, when really, rather than think about a fork in the road, I can go left or right. If you're an idea, you have 360 degrees around you. You can go any direction. You can do anything. So, after I saw this in October, and as we were continuing to work through the changes in the business, it's like, well, am I a video guy, or am I someone who's a strategist, or am I a business owner, or am I an entrepreneur, or what am I? What's the value I bring? What do I do? If I'm an idea of something, I can take that idea anywhere, right? And I think that supports what start with why, and what Simon Sinek says. I got to learn the guy's last name. Sinek, whatever.
I have no idea.
What Simon says and start with why is the whole idea about Apple, right? Like Apple operated as an idea better than anything else. If it was a story, to use Andrew's analogy, if it was a story, then it would be a computer company. It was a computer company that was successful, then that was failing, and then Steve Jobs came back in, and then he saved it, and then, but there's still like a story of this computer company. But then all of the crap that they did extra just doesn't make any sense at all.
No.
Right? But instead they're operating with their why, or their idea. And so that's really why I thought that Andrew's story was just so interesting, because I think that if people were willing to think about it and embrace it, they would find it freeing. They wouldn't feel so compelled to try and define their identity and try and repeat who they are. They would be more comfortable and more able to kind of just move sideways rather than just always forward.
So, and by killing us, our stories are killing us, he just means that they're stifling potential.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're holding us back, right?
Yeah.
And he says a perfect. The thing that I took away from it was, the older you get, the less likely you are to be willing to change, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was Andrew who said it or the person who was introducing him. I apologize, but someone said, like you have a certain number of chips, right? In your 20s, you can make a certain number of changes or mistakes. Was that Andrew, or was that the guy introducing him who said that?
I didn't hear the introduction.
Okay,
no, so
yeah. So
I would say it was
the guy who introduced him, or unless if it was Andrew who said it in the speech, was like, let's say that you have 10, oops, I screwed up chips, or I got to make a big change chips, and so in your teens you're expected not to know anything. In your 20s, you might cash in 5 or 6 of those chips, just figuring out who you are. Oops, I messed up. Oops, I'm changing. I'm picking my career. I'm picking my lifestyle. I'm picking my partner. I'm figuring things out. And then, but by the time you're in your 30s, you only have 4 of those left, and so you might use 2 or 3 of them in your 30s, and then you only have 1 or 2 of them left when you're in your 40s, and you use those. And then by your 50s, it's like, I'm out of oops, I need to make a big change chips. That's not how life works, right? We think that's how it works. We think that it's acceptable to figure your stuff out in your 20s, and then in your 30s maybe do a few smaller ones. But by your 40s or 50s, you're supposed to know who you are and be on a path and be defined and have everything figured out and not make big changes. That's the problem with this story, right? That's the problem. That's what's killing you. It's when you are unwilling or when you're in your 20s, you don't think anything about taking a year off and traveling the world. When you're in your 40s and you have the kids, the mortgage, the car payments, the career, the everything else, it all seems too risky. You can't pause life. You can't pause your responsibilities to do what you want to do. That's what Andrew's saying you need to break. You need to be willing to be the idea of yourself. And if the idea of you is someone who's a lifelong learner, then quit your job and pack up your kids and move to Paris and put them in, like I heard someone talk about that, right? They had their kids in a French school, and they thought that the Toronto French school was kind of okay, but they were in a point in their life where they wanted to immerse their kids in full French, so they moved their family to Paris for 2 years. It's like... What? Right, and so we think of that, and we're like, that is mind-blowing. They must have been rich. They must have been crazy. Like, why, how could someone do that? Like, that's amazing. That's one of those crazy stories that only rich people or crazy people do. But they weren't. I mean, they were as far as I can remember, they were middle class people who were just went, hey, we can do this. They figured out a way to readjust their life to do it, and then their kids spent like 2 years in Paris learning French, and they rented a little apartment, and I mean, it wasn't like this great lifestyle thing, but that's pretty cool. Right?
Yeah,
that's
really
different
cool.
than the like, I can't do that. So that's what I took away from Andrew's, which is maybe a bit different than even what he meant. But that's how
I feel like I like it better now, having heard what you took away from it. I think it's more interesting hearing sort of how it affected you.
Cool.
All right. Do you want to talk about Jordan now?
Do you want to talk about Jordan?
No. Oh my goodness.
So why didn't you like Jordan's?
Okay.
Again, I
don't like this story at all.
You don't like the guy? You don't like his story? You don't like what happened?
No.
Were you aware of it when it happened?
It was last Christmas, right?
It was like, no, it was before Christmas. I think it broke.
It was November.
I think it broke.
In November, like November 21st or something.
So quick recap, obviously.
Yeah.
So Jordan was the person who like broke the internet when him and his partner, his fiance, split up. He had these 2 around the world tickets. And he couldn't get, they were non-refundable. So he went onto Reddit, posted as a bit of a lark, as a bet, that if any woman with the similar exact name as his ex-fiance's ex-partner, that he would take them around the world with him.
Yeah, it was a dare, apparently.
Yeah.
And he regretted it, he said right away.
I mean, I very much remember this breaking when it broke, because it is one of those crazy stories, right?
Yeah.
So what didn't you like about him? You just thought he was an unappealing person, or
Okay.
I mean, what I took.
Let me
what
just
I took,
look at my notes.
Well, so let's see. The first line of the note: I hate this guy. Last line of the note:
Yeah.
Almost killed you? Question mark? Question mark? What the hell? I hate this guy again.
Well,
You're very hard on him.
Yeah, I guess I felt like he was saying this whole big thing happened to him, and he was almost surprised by it. But for me, I felt like he had more intention there, that he knew what was going to happen. And he was surprised by all the like fame and all the like the different like movie deals and stuff that all came his way from this. But it didn't get him what he thought it would, which would be like an overall purpose. But he has turned that into his purpose. His purpose is now spreading the message that he has no purpose. And so he's used that he has a charity, and all his speaking commitments come out of this idea that he had this big thing happen to him. Oops, I don't know how it happened. And
So okay, and
he thought he'd get a purpose, but he didn't. And he did.
And maybe so. So what I took away from it was, again, like Andrew's, maybe I took something different than what was being said. But
Right. I do think that because I read some of his blog, I think that shaped my... I don't hate him. I hate that you read that, but I just mean I
why
didn't...
did you write it twice in your notes then?
Because that's what I was thinking when I was listening to his talk. But he bothered me, and I didn't really feel like he was very genuine, and I thought that the whole purpose of the talk was him being super genuine.
Okay, so when I was there in the room, there were a few audience gasps or moans, like, oh.
Really?
Like as he's speaking, and I rolled my eyes a bit. I was like, okay, let's calm down,
calm
everyone.
down.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what it was about the event? So like the event opened with a really amazing ballet performance, and
Okay.
the whole event, the whole day opened with this amazing ballet performance. And I will admit that they were very good at the ballet. They were very good at dance. It was the Canadian Royal Ballet. I don't have my notes in front of me, but it opened with this great performance. And this guy came out, he's like 20, 21, who's the choreographer, and he told this amazing story, and it was all very they did a great job doing what they do. But the audience went bananas. Like standing ovation.
Okay.
People went apeshit over
They were
this
like,
thing.
ballet.
Right?
Like, they
and
loved
so
it.
and so I was moved by it, and
Right.
I thought they did a great job doing what they do, and maybe ballet's just not my thing. But I had a feeling that out of the 3,000 people with me in the room, or the 1,000 people, or however many people there were, I felt like most people were going crazy because they felt like that is the thing to do. They felt like they need to be seen liking ballet rather than potentially actually liking ballet. Do you understand what I mean? Like you're in the moment, you're in the event, you're like
totally. And so
in that environment,
all right, I see where you're going with this,
in that
and
environment,
I feel like
when Jordan is speaking and the audience goes, "Oh," I'm like, seriously? Like,
but that's what his whole talk was kind of about.
Well,
which
and
was
so
kind of cool.
And so, like I made a friend there, and he concluded by saying like it was very, very powerful, and I was like, really? Like so again,
What's their friend's name?
an imaginary friend. No, do you want me to say it's Daniel? Is this guy that I met?
I think I know him.
No, you don't.
Oh, it's
another
not
guy named Daniel.
Oh, I thought Daniel was at it.
No, Daniel wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
No, so there was this guy I met named Daniel, who we were talking. We both started talking in the morning. You can cut this out if you think it's boring. We both started talking in the morning. Then we agreed we don't know anyone here. We'll sit beside each other. We talked most of we talked in between sessions, and then I found out he's working in the financial sector. I found out all this stuff, but it wasn't until like lunchtime. We spent like 4 hours together before I found out which company he worked for. The company is one of our clients. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So anyway, we stayed in touch, and we've gotten lunch a few times together, and he's a good guy. But anyway, so.
What a bromance.
I digress. But
we watched the ballet together, and it was magical.
It was.
Okay, so I sort of see what you're saying.
So what I'm saying is like you have to understand that you're in an environment, a very encouraging environment, one where everyone is on the edge of their seats, keen to show how cultured they are, let's say, like how amazing they are. And I'm a bit cynical for that kind of stuff. I don't like this group think. I like being a part of something bigger than myself, but I don't like just doing stuff because everyone else is doing stuff.
Yeah.
So I watch this a bit cynically too, and I know where you're kind of like unsure about it.
It's douchey. It's a little douchey.
Yes.
That's what it is, right?
But so what I was so amazed by with his talk was the difference, and I might be reading into this, but it's the juxtaposition between the story, the person that the media wanted us to believe he was, the person I saw on stage, and then me connecting the dots and the one small comment he made about, obviously being an alcoholic and being other things, and he didn't get into it, but the reason why his fiancée left him.
So
when I project...
I didn't really hear that. Where did you get that information? I didn't really see that in the...
He said it was like a one-liner, it was a throwaway line, as far as I remember, because where else would I have learned this from? He said, amongst all of the story and all of the hype and all of these things, I mean, no one ever went into why did his fiancée leave him? Why was the wedding broken up? Why was he left with this ticket? He was the hero in the media story, but deep within his heart and within who he knew himself to be, he wasn't the hero.
Okay, I got that. I just didn't know if he was an alcoholic.
He said he was an alcoholic.
Oh, I didn't catch that. It seems like something I would catch too. Did you know that Bachelor offered him a deal?
Really?
To do like a Bachelor style, like finding, I forget what her name was, whatever. And he was like, no. Also, Ryan Reynolds told him that it'd be an honor to play him in a movie.
Well, that's cool.
I know.
This is all cool. Like they have an amazing story. So what I really found, just not disturbing. What I found really, really lasting, what really left an impression on me, was that I've spent so many years trying to really hone and define my purpose.
Yeah. Okay.
And then this comes along, and in a very believable, in my opinion, in a very real way, says that it's bullshit.
Yeah.
And that the world tells us, and the gurus and the self-help people tell us to have a purpose. And I don't necessarily reach his conclusion that maybe our purpose is to have no purpose. But what I agree with is the act of defining your purpose is pretty bullshitty. And it's something that I think people arrive at too quickly. We've spent a year and a half in the company working through this stuff. And I still don't feel like we're there. And my business coach and all these other people around me are like, okay, it's defined. Let's move on. Why do you keep rehashing it? Why do you keep... And it's because I think yes, in a weekend you can't do that. In a retreat you can't do that. I think that, and why these two kind of work together to me is I think Andrew's idea of being an idea, not a story, is something that you can define and hold on to. But Jordan's idea of define your purpose, live your purpose, achieve your purpose is a little bit bullshitty. And so these maybe contradict each other. I don't know, maybe people will see these two and go like, these completely contradict each other. But to me, again, it's like, there's something to what Jordan's saying, that he had, he was a broken person who's working through some hard stuff. But from the outside world, he went viral. He had people knocking on his door. He had everything that our society and our world tells us one should have. And he had, it appears to me, if he had the balls, he had the ability to capitalize on those things. And yet he didn't. Did he sign the movie deal? Or do you think the movie deal fell through and then he's just now rewriting history?
Yes, and he's writing a book.
Okay.
He on his blog.
You're so like, I feel like maybe you know more about it, and that's fine. But I feel like you're caught up in the motives, and all I'm reflecting on is my impression of his story.
Yeah, well,
and maybe he's rewriting history.
He if you go to his blog, he has like a 2015 review where he like has a timeline and he says a whole bunch of stuff that happened to him in the last year. And I read that since the breaking of the story sort of thing. And I read that. And so that's how I know this information.
That's fine.
But he said that the movie deal fell through and the TV show fell through because of, like, he describes different things, like a freak accident, this fell through. And then something, this fell through. So it didn't sound like he turned anything down.
Oh, okay.
So
he had everything at his fingertips.
Both of his companies are directly linked to this story too.
But that's fine. But and that's the other thing. It's like a company's.
But how is that not him getting a purpose out of it? Right? Like I just don't. I feel like
there's a difference between a purpose and action, or tactical things. Listen.
Yeah,
anyone can start a company. Anyone can start a company. It costs $75. If you want to pay a lawyer, it's $1,000. Anyone can start a company. Anyone can start a charity. It goes back to like when we started PHANTA, right? The reason why I didn't feel like an entrepreneur is because we made like $86,000 or $100,000 in our first year, and we were like on the verge of bankruptcy, and it was just me alone. I didn't feel like an entrepreneur. I felt like someone who's just like trying to hustle and pay for the food on the table type thing, right? The reason why I don't feel like an entrepreneur so much today is because I feel like an entrepreneur should have multiple companies. But what I've learned in the last 10 years is what you project to the world doesn't share the whole story, doesn't share who you really are, doesn't share what the troubles are. You could have a 30-person company on the verge of bankruptcy, or you can have a 3-person company that you're just rolling in money, and it's like, which would you rather have? It's just whatever you want. So
money rolling.
Well, so anyway, so the takeaway I had from Jordan's was mostly, to me, the impression that it left with me was, hey, this flies in the face of everything that I've been working on for the last year and a half, and everything that I feel like we should do, that we should spend time defining your purpose, that you should spend time living your purpose, that you should spend time working towards fulfilling that purpose, and that purpose should be bigger than yourself. And this kind of just stops and says, maybe that's bullshit. Maybe. Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs got a lot of heat because maybe 2 years ago he gave an interview where he said that as a society we spend too much time telling kids in high school and college and 20-somethings to figure out your purpose and live your purpose, when at the end of the day you should just get off your ass and get a job and learn some skills and get your hands dirty and work really hard. And doing all of those things will take you much further in life, and being open to opportunities will take you much further in life than wasting all your time trying to figure out how you are going to change the world. And then, there are other people like Evan Carmichael who very much spends a lot of time really focusing on helping you determine who you are and how you're going to change the world, and thinking big and living big. I think you got to think big. I think thinking small is most people who think small will never accomplish their dreams because they spend all day just trying to get through the day. But, there's something to all of this stuff. There's something to what Mike Rowe says about just, the finding your purpose thing is bullshit. But maybe it's not that finding your purpose is bullshit. Maybe it's that people work at finding their purpose and then don't actually work at fulfilling it. Maybe that's the difference. I'm just talking this out now.
Or saying, okay, I haven't found my purpose, but I need so badly to look like I have one. This bullshit will be my purpose.
And that's what
kind of,
you know, Jordan says at the end of his little, like, you know, let's shout out what our purpose is.
Yeah, and
you know?
he was like, I was lying because I don't know.
And it's going to change, though. Like, look at someone like Bill Gates, right?
Yeah.
You know, like when Bill Gates started Microsoft, I don't know if he was purpose-driven. I just don't know if he was purpose-driven. But what he's doing today, you know, with him and his wife and their foundation, you know, where they want to cure
turning poop into water. Isn't that what they're doing?
They're doing a lot of things.
It's one facet of the
one of their goals
operation.
is there are three main, my understanding of it is there are three main diseases that are curable potentially in our lifetime but affect great people, like malaria, and there are these three main diseases. They want to, in their lifetime, cure one of these diseases. That is a big purpose. That's something that drives the foundation and drives everything that they do, and that's really admirable. I think we can all have big purposes. We don't have to be Bill Gates to do that. It's just, I don't know. I guess the takeaway is just don't do it, like you're saying. Don't do it just because you feel like others. And it's like with Andrew's thing, right? Don't spend your time trying to work really hard to be something you're not because you feel like others want you to be.
Yeah, and defining who you are.
Yeah.
For others.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's
doing all the things that you think you should be doing because you think you should be doing them. It's a lot of effort. If you spend more time just doing the stuff that is actually important.
Yeah.
It's hard to define what that is. It's like when I went to Miami for the weekend for the end of the NASCAR race with my brother-in-law and my brother. So we flew down to Miami. It was great. It was last minute thing. It was like, hey, this is a great idea. Let's all go to the final NASCAR race and get some tickets, and it was great. But afterwards, I was just like, you know, as fun as it was like a lot of work and it was a lot of time and it cost a lot of money and all this stuff. And it was like, did I do this because I really wanted to do this, or did I do this because I feel like it would be a really cool thing for me to do to tell others? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I know what you mean. I'm a girl.
What does that have to do with anything? Is this like girl culture?
I know all about stuff you do so you can tell other people on social media that you did it.
Yeah. And I mean, I wasn't thinking like social media wise. I was just like, I was thinking back about my motivations. Like, you know, like after it was all said and done, I was like, I don't know, like, and I said to my wife when I got home, I was like, I feel like we spend a lot of time and energy and money doing the things that we feel like we should do because we feel like we should do it rather than because we actually should. And that could be anything.
Because even you actually want to.
That could be anything, though. That could be like, you know, the way you keep your house or the way I keep your yard or the way that, you know, like my wife feels it's so important to keep the house, like, when people show up for a party or something, to have the house look a certain way. And it's like, well, if these people have been in our lives for a few years and they just drop by, when they just drop by on a like Wednesday afternoon and open the door and we're like, oh, or like, you know, because we have 4 kids and it's busy,
kids.
or if they drop by on a Saturday and they're like, oh, this place is like spotless because we've hidden all the junk, you know, away in the house. It's like if they know us well enough to drop by and we say, come on in, and you're not embarrassed, then why on the Saturday are we working so hard to make the house look a certain way? Right?
Yeah.
And it's just like,
that's definitely one of the first things that I've been able to let go of. Like now having a kid and working, I never thought I'd be able to. I've always been so crazy about having the house a certain way. And my mom, if you saw my parents' house, like it's spotless. It's unreal all the time. And,
but
and like
the two
staged.
It's just the two
Yeah,
of them.
but it's been like that my whole life. Other people would be like, oh, like, could you eat in other rooms of your house other than at the kitchen table? Never. Like we've joked before. We're like, this is kind of a sad topic, but my sister, once we were talking about a kid that committed suicide. Like he jumped on the rail at like the subway. Oh. We're like, that's so awful. Why would you do that? And Deandra, my sister's like, if I wanted to commit suicide, I'd just take a bag of popcorn in the TV room, wait for mom to get home, because she really hated it if we ate anywhere in the house.
Oh, man.
Or like got anything messy. Like we never left stuff out. And like it sounds like it was crazy and we were raised by Nazis, but all three of us were super neat, because like people cleaning their room, I never got that. My room was always clean.
Oh, see,
I never cleaned my room.
I go totally opposite way. So, like we were never allowed to eat in my mom's van, and if you've been in my car,
my car is a disaster.
If you've been in my
There's
car,
fishies everywhere.
It is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I tell people, it's like they're like, well, when you own like a really luxury car, you'll have to keep it clean. It's like, no, I can own a Porsche or Lamborghini. It is gonna be a disaster because it's not like owning a nicer thing's going to make you a neater person or anything.
No, is it going to give me extra hours in the day to vacuum my car every time I take my child somewhere? Because like I do not have that kind of time. You have to take the vacuum out of the house, hook it up outside, and then like that's terrible. Or drive through one of those things and like pay $20, but still.
Anyway,
but
so
I've been able to let go of that completely.
You let go of those things, and you know. And that's where I take from all this. So anyway, that was our very special episode on TED Talks.
Like we definitely meandered a bit about other stuff, but I think the moral of the story though is like these TED Talks are just people that exist in our city that have cool ideas to share, and that's a cool thing to like listen to some of those ideas. I'm sure there's other ones to check out too.
There are.
Cool.
There are. And with that, we'll wrap up this week's episode. Leah, very good.
Got all that?
No, that was a fantastic conclusion. The conclusion is that there are people who live in our city.
They're just like regular guys. Like I'm sure you
and
could
women.
come up with
there were
something.
Women speakers as
and
well.
Women, yeah.
It's just they spoke mostly about like engineering and space.
It's smart stuff.
Other stuff like that. I brought on the guys who talked about philosophical type things. But
cool.
anyway, so I hope you check those out. I hope you like this episode. And again, we're sorry that we weren't able to play clips. Our goal was to play the TED Talks on this, but again, licensing agreements the way they are, we can't afford the lawsuits. But anyway, with that, Leah, thanks so much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Anytime. Like next week.
Oh yeah, I'll see you then.
Yes, and to all of you guys, have a great week. Do you want to talk about TED at all? Do you have any questions?